Thanks for joining us for this panel. We have an exciting group of people working in the sound industry that represents a diverse group working in 3D sound or the future of sound. Please find a seat. Before we get started, I'd like to ask you guys some questions just to get a sense of your relation to sound. So we had actually some ambitious plans trying to do wireless headsets in here, but there's too much interference, so we decided against that. But let me just get a sense of hands. How many of you guys have a surround sound system in your house? What about in your car?
Impressive.
How many of you have a pair of headsets? How many of you have headsets on you? All right, not bad. For those of you that have headsets on you can see the link up there. The HTTP side, if you connect to the Wi-Fi and try to connect that link, we'll try to play some samples on your own device as we go through this presentation. One of the points I wanted to make, though, is really interesting. I think one of the, at least what makes me excited about where we're going with sound is when you think about headsets as the playback device, it's ubiquitous. Everybody has a pair of headsets. So if we can do something amazing for people on headsets, it'll change the way we consume entertainment. So let me go through the panel. We got Scott from Soundline. We got...
Hello.
So why don't you introduce yourself? Go ahead.
Sure. I'm just very excited that there's a basketball demonstration right next to us. That's fantastic. I'm Scott Persson from Sound Lounge in New York City. I mainly do sound mixing for commercials and film and television, and have become involved in 3D audio strictly because it's interesting to me. And again, as Geir's point is, we all have headphones. We can all enjoy this new surround experience with the gear that we already have. So that's how I got here. Next.
All right. Is that working? You good? Okay. Got it. Don't hit the bottom. All right. Next, Robert. You got a great name for a company, Awful Code.
Yeah.
That must work really well with investors.
Oh yeah, for sure. So I'm actually a creative director in advertising, and but when I was a kid, I used to program, and after a good 16 years without writing one line of code, I decided that I wanted to make this cool little app and get back to programming. And so the company name came from those first 2-3 months of absolutely awful code. Nothing worked. It was a little bit of a learning curve.
But in terms of sound, you have a unique product that relates to 3D sound. Can you just...
Yeah, so I'm very soon it's going to be out. It's called Surround Player. And basically what it does is you... on your iPhone and iPad, you can take any sort of movie or video that has a surround track, and what it will do is position each one of those speakers virtually. So with any pair of headphones, you can play the movie in surround sound.
Very cool. Veronique, you're with Sennheiser, and before you speak, I'd like to give Sennheiser a hand for supplying all the equipment to this event.
Yeah.
So,
thank you.
Hey, go ahead.
Yeah, for Sennheiser, Sennheiser has a research lab. Actually, we call it Strategic Innovation in San Francisco and Zurich. And I'm heading this research lab in which we do some work on 3D audio. As far as I'm concerned, I fell into 3D audio a long time ago when I was still studying in France, and by a passion for music and some skills in science. So I did my PhD on that, working hand in hand with some composers who were a little bored, working just about pitch, rhythms and timbre of the instruments, and wanted to add space as a tool for composition. So I had some work done there. Now how my passion for 3D sound and Sennheiser mix is because at Sennheiser we have both recording techniques, microphones, playback devices like headphones, and the two can work hand in hand pretty well to give some tools for the creators to work with space.
Very good. And my name is Geir. I'm with DTS. We have a long history of innovation in sound. And for us, it's really the third wave. We work with cinema, did a lot in home theater, and now consumers are moving to portable devices, and hence delivering a better experience on mobile. We think 3D sound is a key component. So what we'll do here, we'll kind of talk through the flow of content creation through distribution of 3D sound, and then come back to the playback. So I last week spent some time at Mobile World Congress. One of the most interesting statistics that I took away from the show was that as you build out mobile networks, 4G, LTE, as you look 3-4 years out in the future, 70% of that bandwidth is projected to be spent watching digital media and videos. So Scott, in your world, working with advertisers, what's different from a workflow or creation perspective when you work with 3D sound versus normal stereo?
Is that my mic? Sorry. The process is not all that different in terms of, I mean, it maybe involve a little bit longer discussion with the clients. People are coming in. We talk about their vision a little sooner, perhaps. If it's someone that's interested in using 3D to help tell their story, it would be nice to know that sort of early in the process, because we can gear the deliverables towards that and think about, you know, a bigger spatial environment for them and their product.
And in terms of the advertisers, maybe Robert could comment on this too. How important is sound to them? Is that something that they put a lot of weight on in terms of budgets and in general, or do you feel that's still a ways to go?
I don't know if you want to handle that. Budgetarily, I can't really speak to that. They don't let me deal with numbers at all. But
I think right now it really depends on the idea. So when you have commercials that are very simple dialogue, or when you have things like that, you don't have as much production budget going to audio. But when you have, we're going to see later on a PlayStation spot that Scott put together. When you have something that's super visually rich and with lots of action, then you have a little bit more time and money being dedicated to it.
Yeah, Scott, so you want to comment a little bit on the, we may not be able to play it in real time as we intended, but you want to talk a little bit about the spot that
Sure.
is part of this demo, so people can have
Sure.
a reference point and listen to it?
yeah, absolutely. This spot that I remixed was originally done by a different mixer, so I was actually given all of his elements. Does everybody know what Pro Tools is? We have a lot of audio pros here. Okay, thank you. Okay, so I got the Pro Tools session, not just stems, but I had about 120 tracks worth of sound effects, dialogue, background vocals, whatever. And it was great to have access to all these elements, because obviously the more you have, the more control you can play with. So what I did was sort of look at the visuals many hundreds of times and sort of place very, very realistically where, you know, if something's flying over your head, you want to feel it flying over your head as best as I can do with the technology given. Now, having said that, I think where we are now is going to be even more impressive in a few years. The tools, in terms of working with Pro Tools, they're good, they're not amazing yet. So what we're working towards is that absolute reality of, if something flies from back here to over here, I want to sense that. And you do get a sense of that, and it's pretty cool. I think in a few years, and we talked about this, it's going to be even more impressive. So that's what, you know, there are some limitations, but we're working towards bigger possibilities.
And one of the limitations that we have is that a lot of the effect is happening because of how the sound waves are reflecting and refracting inside of your head. And guess what? We don't have the same heads. So usually we're using a head that's sort of, it's the median head for all of us, but that's not truly adapted to it. So hopefully what we're going to start seeing is things that can account for that, can maybe scan your head and say, okay, well.
That would be questions for you guys.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah.
Like,
Yes.
if there's anything coming like that.
Yeah, exactly. No, so we'll get to distribution in a minute, but before we get away from the content production, I know Sennheiser, you also produce microphones. And Veronique,
Yeah.
can you speak a little bit to some of the actual recording techniques that you guys are working with that may enhance the headphone experience?
Yeah. So it's been many years already, decades actually, that Sennheiser has tried to pioneer or make usable, make tools to do 3D audio. For example, in the 70s already, our company released a stereo set. I mean, it looked like if you want a headband, but put this way, with two microphones, one on each side, that you could use to record binaurally, as we call it, so to give this 3D audio effect by just recording the stereo output of these microphones. That was in the 70s. More recently, through our brand Neumann, we actually have a dummy head. That's the KU100, which allows you to do some musical recording and record those binaural cues with far from an optimal, maybe, or an average. It's an average head. Now, I think the challenge comes, and where it becomes extremely compelling and interesting for us as a research office or facility, is the emergence of techniques, the so-called object-based audio format. Is it okay to talk about that now?
Yeah, please go ahead.
So, in the same way that video games, allow for the end user to create their own individualized experience by, deciding where to go in the game, and the sound adapts to where he or she has decided to go. That as a requirement on the audio assets, that are managed and rendered. All the audio are objects that are individualized and not pre-mixed. They are remixed or re-rendered at runtime. And now if you transpose that to what it could do for live broadcast of, let's say, a musical event or a sports event, how do you capture your audio objects? What are the microphones that will allow you to create those individualized sound elements that can be distributed to the end user and then rendered at home, depending on the viewpoint that you decide, or the player you decide to track? Are we going to put little microphones on each football player? I don't think so. So we need smarter techniques for that, and that's a challenge we'd love to address.
Yeah, no, I agree. I think this is a very interesting development. And Scott, and when you were talking earlier, it seems like in the Pro Tools you must be working essentially with a surround bed that you're creating this 3D mix from, right? Is that correct?
Sometimes it depends. Again, with the PlayStation Spot, I was given all the elements, individual mono and stereo stems, so I can put them wherever I like. And I think there's a graphic of that stereo, of the surround field, if that can go up.
Yep.
For those that have seen, this is
go.
just the Avid MC control, but just to visually represent where you want to move stuff. Obviously, in a 5.1's true discrete surround environment, you can put stuff wherever you want. With the 3D, working with headphones, you want to achieve this, but it's done completely differently. You can't quite. I don't have that sort of control.
Yep. And I think that's what Veronique was talking about. When you get to object-based audio, essentially, when you look at that screen, instead of having 7 or that's 5 channels of audio on that screen right there, you can essentially identify a single point anywhere in the circles. So you can control each element. And in games today, that's essentially what happens as the engine renders the games. The designers define certain objects that they track. Now, when it comes to playback to consumers, from our point of view, where this is exciting is that you could send that data in the bitstream to the end user, and you can allow the user to have some additional controls, but maybe just as important, you can optimize playback for any scenario. So if you have an 11.1 system, 5.1 system, or headphones, each user will get the optimal playback. Now, interactivity is another area that also could open up in this sense, and I think the most classic or examples is probably changing the announcer on your sports event. So if you're watching your favorite team playing away, you get your home announcer as he's away versus the away announcer. But there's a lot of other elements as well. Now, when it gets to the consumer, and Robert, I really like your story because I think you innovated based on your own frustration as a consumer. Is that correct?
Yeah.
So why don't you
And-
kind of go back to how you came about the idea of the surround player?
So, in first-person shooter competitions, all the gamers are wearing headphones, and I was curious, well, what's happening there? And at first I thought that they had like special headphones that had, I don't know, 3 or 4 speakers inside. And then I started looking at it and realized that they had just a mixer that they connected to. And I'm like, well, what's happening here? And I started finding out about binaural recordings. And I'm like, well, this is just sound waves. So there must be a way of calculating this and just remixing it, because I used to fly a lot for work, and I mean the amount of movies you watch on planes is crazy. I'm like, that's something I would like. I know a few people that would like that too. And it had been a while since I had programmed. I'm like, well, it's time. And
Yeah, no, it's very cool. It works well, and I think from Sennheiser's point of view, then when you think about the consumer and the playback, are you doing something different with the headphones? Do you think that's necessary, or what's your perspective on that?
Yeah, we are thinking and doing things. For example, I will just mention we use 3D audio and just released the headset with 3D audio, using it in a very different way than we have talked about just now. It's for our telecommunication division that sells headsets to the call centers, where people are listening over the phone for hours and hours and get fatigued because the incoming voice is just right there in the middle of their head. And so the people from this division just were wondering, how about we use a 3D audio thing just for the voice, and is it going to help with listener fatigue? And we did some research and some studies, and yes, it really helps you stay longer on the phone and be less nervous or annoyed. So here we go. That's one of the things we just did with 3D audio. Now, we were going back to the object-based revolution, basically, that DTS and Dolby are spearheading. Of course, when, like Sennheiser, you're on both sides, on the capture and on the reproduction, it's very exciting, because if you're able to capture some good sound and attach to it some metadata, some special information that your system on the other end, at the end users on the headphone side, can make use to augment the rendering, I think it could be a very powerful experience that we could deliver.
Yeah, no, I agree, and I think one of the most rewarding things for me personally have been working with artists and content creators, exploring some of these concepts, because I think the ultimate goal for the artist is to deliver the content in the way they intended to as many people as possible, and typically that's been very challenging. You could go to the theater, and if you go to the theater and they have a good playback system, that is a great experience, but it's expensive and it's inconvenient. Then in the home, systems are very variable, and even the people that have a high-end system, setting it up is difficult, so it's unpredictable. So the concept of being able to deliver something of the same quality or even better to headphones is very, very exciting for the people that create the content as well. So I agree with you. And Scott, on your end, when you present your clients with some of this work, some of the samples, what's been their reaction in general when they hear that level of sound?
Well, it's nice to see their reactions in terms of the comment that I usually hear is, oh, I never heard that before, or it's nice to finally be able to pick that sort of detail out, or it sounds bigger and more impressive than it ever has before. And for some reason, fuller. Everybody seems to think that it sounds just richer, I guess is the word that they use a lot. So that's been rewarding, very rewarding, And it's fun to get those kind of reactions instead of, that sounds like shit. So.
No, I think another thing I'll encourage you to listen for, excuse me, one of the things that, Robert's articulating earlier that you use some psychoacoustics to recreate the acoustical space that really you recorded versus what you're playing back. The acoustical space in a set of headphones is pretty, no offense, but it's pretty slim. It's small drivers, and it's a very small device. So bass is a lot of times a big problem to reproduce bass in headphones. And I think when you listen to these samples, if you keep that in mind, you'll hear much better bass because of the fact that you're actually recreating psychoacoustic, or recreating the acoustical space that was intended for the content, not just flat out what's coming out of the headphones. So it's a very, very good point. Robert, on your end, when you, what do you use as input in your player? So can you just talk a little bit more about the player? So obviously, what you said earlier is it allows you to take movies or any kind of multi-channel content and then play it back in surround on headphones. So that's a basic premise, correct?
Yeah, so most movies that, say you download a movie from the App Store or God knows where you got that movie from, usually you have at least one audio track, and that audio track might have stereo sound, or it might have 5.1 or even 7.1 sound. And so what it's doing is opening it up, looking for that surround track, and saying, okay, found it. So now it's going to go and say, the left front channel needs to virtually be there. And what's truly happening is, imagine if you have, say, an ambulance that's to your front and left. Well, that sound's gonna hit your left ear before it hits your right ear. And once it goes to the back, it's gonna be a little muffled, right? So that's, I'm making it very simple, but that's how your brain kind of positions sound. You do lose information, and it is much better when you get object-based, because you can go and say, instrument by instrument, like object by object, exactly what's the progression. What I'm doing with Surround Player is getting something that's already been mixed and just positioning those virtual speakers.
At this point, I also want to see if there's any questions in the audience. We have a couple more subjects here, but before we get to those, I'll give you guys a chance if there are questions. Anybody, there's a mic in the middle. We'll ask you to stand up and speak. If there are any questions from the audience, subjects you want to touch on? See one coming.
Here comes Matt.
All right. Do you mind saying who you're with and your name and what the question is?
Can you hear me? Is this on? Hey, well, my name's Matt Desner. I just find all of this fascinating, and I just had a question for people that some of you may be aware or may not be, but to experience 3D sound on a consumer level and what your goals are, whether it's media that you purchase or media that you download would already have this embedded, and then you can experience it that way, or is it only through a special box you think ultimately that you have locally? And then the headphone. Great
question. So the link that you see up there, if you connect to that link, you're actually not getting the file, you are playing it. So that is essentially a sample of a stream, or in other words, a broadcast. Right, so it's definitely possible.
Thanks.
Yeah, no, I'm just going to follow up on that. I mean, I'm not delivering a different sort of file. It's, it's the stereo file that has the encoding built into it. So it can go on iTunes, Spotify, it can be done right now. You could listen to it right now. There's nothing to buy or change out.
I mean, you could have Hollywood decide that all stereo tracks in their movies would be processed that way. And they can basically flip a switch and start doing that.
Thank you.
Great. Other questions? Okay. One other thing I wanted to touch on, you guys are in advertising. Do you see an increased demand for mobile-specific content? So content that people create that they want this to make impact on mobile specifically?
I think advertising hasn't truly figured out mobile yet. It is, in a way, almost invasive. It is a very personal medium, and a lot of what we're seeing right now is YouTube pre-rolls. Usually you can skip them. So I think that there is a learning curve in terms of finding a balance between personalizing that experience, but without getting creepy. Right? Like,
because the reason I ask, in the home, there's some headphone usage, but on mobile, a lot of users are on headphones, right?
Yeah.
So
Yeah, for sure.
Scott, anything you want to add to that?
I definitely agree. It's a little bit scattered in terms of interest and intent, and whether there's a division of an agency that's just digital, or maybe they're just kind of putting it together now. That's at least what we're seeing at Sound Lounge, where the conversations are now happening that this sort of work is coming around, and they realize that, oh, we should probably do something with the sound, and then we hopefully get on those conversations earlier, so it can be at least, part of their thought process. It's happening more and more now, I think.
Yeah.
Yeah, I'm not going to say that this relies on market data, but nevertheless, I would love it if music would be streamed more and more to the phone, and by that I don't mean audio only, but audio with video, and that brings a couple of exciting things ahead of us. First of all, I think headphone is the device of choice for listening, so that's great for a company like Sennheiser. And number two, the screen is so small that it makes the case to be able to choose a point of view or be able to navigate a scene and therefore describe space in sound very accurately. And if you don't mind my plugging your thing, I really love the work that you've showed recently on engagement.
Yeah, so what we did a neuroscience study. So basically, we took over 100 people, and they were just put in a room. They were just playing back video content on a 10-inch tablet and normal earbuds. So a sample group just got normal stereo audio, and the control group had our Headphone X solution, which is basically a 3D audio solution. And the amazing thing was, during this video, they showed 4 pieces of video. The video varied in quality from 240p to 1080p, which is quite significant if you think about video quality. The outcome was that the engagement or enjoyment went up by measuring these people's brains as they were enjoying the content, went up 60% with the 3D audio solution, and there was no statistical difference in enjoyment from the video quality changing. So to your point, on a small screen, there's clearly diminishing returns on increasing video quality. However, audio makes a big impact on people's enjoyment. So I agree. That's why I'm asking. I think mobile, if you looked at the statistics, that 70% of the mobile bandwidth can be used for streaming, it seems like audio should have a big role in making an impact for that content. Let me just kind of take it on a personal note. So I'll start again with Scott. So what do you listen to? So you're obviously good at creating content, and you're articulate talking about it. But for your own enjoyment, what's your favorite audio experience?
My favorite audio experience? That'd be tough to sum up. Definitely film. I mean, something like Gravity kind of blew me out of the water like everybody else, and that would be the pinnacle for me to work on something like that. But certainly music, and getting more involved with 3D as I have been, to be able to put yourself within an environment, whether you're in the middle of the band or back by the drums, or to be able to manipulate that sort of thing is very interesting to me. Instead of having the 2D perspective of a usual audience stage, it's nice to feel enveloped. I don't know if you guys are working with that stuff at all, but that's pretty cool to me. Somebody like Peter Gabriel is my idol for that kind of stuff.
Yeah.
He's
awesome. Robert?
I think I'm just an average Joe. I like my movies. I like my music when I'm going to work, and but yeah, I have a very simple home theater system at home.
Right. Veronique?
Me, I'm listening to music a lot over headphones. One of the things that fascinate me with this topic is I have a personal taste for contemporary music, and when you go in the live events of such performances, you know, they don't care. They put the loudspeakers how many you need and wherever you need it, and you have a great experience. And then you want to issue some memory of the event, typically, you know, a stereo stream of some sort, and it's very disappointed if you don't have means to really simulate that space and you know, the spatial cues that were
Actually,
delivered live.
I remember something. Dark Side of the Moon was mixed in quadraphonic,
Yeah.
right?
That's right.
And it's an amazing mix. If you can get a hold of that, do. 'Cause
Thanks,
it's
man.
Really
I worked hard on that. Back in the 70s. No, I know that. It's a great
but I have
mix.
to agree that the music, one of the most rewarding things around promoting these our format and headphone next to the music industry is that what you realize the music industry for a long time have produced content a lot for the lowest common denominator. So a lot of the mastering is done for low bitrate streaming or FM radio because that's where a lot of the discovery happens. So it's good reason for it. But in doing that, you tend to both compress the imaging as well as the dynamics in the content. So as they get introduced to some of these solutions and technologies that enable three-dimensional space for headphones and realizing is some big part of their audience are now on headphones, I think you'll see a trend in much more engaging production where they use some of these tools to deliver a much different experience than what you get off iTunes today.
What's nice about the headphone dynamic is, you know, for all these people that have 5.1 playback systems, I guarantee you they're all set up very differently, and they're all varying levels of quality and, you know, placement and things like that. People have the center channel over here I've seen, and the nice thing about the headphones is we can have so much more control about that whole experience, you know, and that's way more exciting. Obviously, there's a difference in quality from earbuds to what you're wearing, for instance, but it's, I think, much narrower, which is very cool.
Yeah, no question.
Yeah, no one's wearing headphones.
Exactly.
Yeah.
So did anyone try to download the link, by the way, or were you able to pull content off the link? I see some people on devices there nodding. Yes? Yes? Thumbs up? You able to listen? You listen to it?
Somebody's got it over there. Cool.
Pretty cool. Yeah.
Is it coming through? Not yet.
Not yet. You're still waiting. It's worth the wait.
We'll
But
just
tomorrow
keep-
morning you should
we'll
be
just
good.
keep talking then.
Any other questions? I encourage you to, if you can't get the link right now, to download the link. You can also go to the respective websites, and there'll be things there as well. Yeah, go ahead.
So I got to warn you, I'm with Cable Labs.
Oh.
Anyway, so I'm just wondering if you're working right now with the broadcasters. Somebody already mentioned that slightly, and with device manufacturers to try to incorporate object audio directly into your cable box and into your direct TV box and into your Pioneer receiver or whatever.
Yeah, I can probably take a first step at that. So the answer is yes. I think you'd see it rolling out in different pace in different scenarios. Sometimes unfortunately the cable box, because it has such a long legacy life, tend to be later in that cycle.
Yeah.
But I do think there's a lot of premise in phones. We're shipping phones today that has this embedded on it. And the phones over the years, phones and tablets really have gained a lot of processing power and the full capability of doing everything we've been talking about on a modern phone today. So I think that's coming in a big way, and I think you'll see a lot over the next 9 to 18 months in terms of in the consumer space as well.
And are you making some progress on the MPEG standard that includes that?
I think that's in the works. Again, I think that like all standards, there's a process that takes some time, but there's no question in my mind that object-based audio will be represented in the next standards.
And just because CES happened and Sony did a keynote on it, any of you also looking at HD audio and some of the high stream formats?
Okay, so I'll let the other ones comment. I think the answer is yes, and the higher resolution, the better. I think that's at least my point of view. But one thing you cannot forget that audio is a funny thing. Just like our demo here today, it's always the law of the lowest common denominator. And when you get to 192 24-bit, then some of the components,
24-bit.
yeah, some of the components, the content maybe that, but some of the components that exist in the consumer devices, not related to processing, doesn't even support that level of resolution. Now, if you're working in Pro Tools, I'm hard pressed to believe that you're doing 192/24 on all your tracks, as well. So if the person making the content doesn't have that high resolution, I question where the value comes in adding it later. So I think there's a little bit of marketing there, but the higher resolution, the better. I'll let maybe Veronique, you want to comment on that as well?
No, actually, I have nothing to add to what you said.
I can tell you right now, I'm not mixing at 192/24.
Exactly.
Almost ever.
So
Occasional music projects. That's it.
But the flight to quality, fully supportive, and I think it's all good. The direction. I just gotta have some reality in terms of what really can be done today and in the near future.
Sure. Well, I'm primarily concerned about bandwidth, right? I mean, if you're gonna try to deliver 192/24, it's going to be bigger than your video stream, and
That's right.
Exactly.
that's going to be a problem.
Yeah.
No real estate.
Hi, my name is Streeter, and I am an immersive interactive environment producer. We create spaces that we interact with visually and digitally. And I guess I'm just curious, more importantly, about, we talked a little bit about video games and maybe traversing through a game map on GTA 5 or something like that versus something on Oculus Rift where we are interacting with a 3D space and a 3D world. A, does that excite you guys as engineers and sound enthusiasts and professionals, and are you guys... Have you worked with one? Have you been?
I have not.
No.
No, I have not.
And what challenges do you guys see as we start to break through that 2D screen and interact with 3D elements digitally and physically? Do you guys see any challenges that you guys are interested in pursuing?
Yeah.
Certainly challenges. I mean, anytime you're putting something, like Veronique was saying before, in a real-time situation where these things are rendering and changing at a moment's notice, I mean, it's a lot of challenges and a lot of creative potential, which is fascinating. I can't speak to that, frankly. I'm more in like, okay, here's the 30-second or 60-second commercial. Here's the linear playback, or here's the film that we're doing, whatever. And that's a completely different storyline. It's very predictable, obviously. That fascinates me, though, because if there's 5 different directions it can go, how am I going to mix all those possibilities, depending on where the player's turning, what's happening, who knows?
And
if
that's
you
the
want to give
thing
me a
is
job,
that
sure, I'm totally into that.
with a game that's being rendered real time, most of the games where you have some sort of binaural processing are using OpenAL, and it's a very low level library, kind of tough to go through, and usually the way that they're designed is kind of trial and error. I have someone I know who works at Ubisoft, and he was saying, like, yeah, we just put the object there, put whatever sound that should be emitted from that object, and kind of wing it. You just go and you listen to it, see if it's working, go back, adjust, rinse, repeat.
Veronique, you had it.
I mean, maybe it's just a small part of your question, but creating immersive landscapes for Oculus Rift, oh yeah, I think it will be pretty cool. And the challenge is probably latency, but you already have the challenge with the video playback and not get your viewers sick. But it would be a very compelling proposition, I think.
Yeah, I have to agree. I think we're starting on that as well. I think one additional comment I'll make is, at some point there's a cognitive overload. So I think it's really important that the content creators get comfortable with the different media, so that you don't overload. One of the things we see when we did the neuroscience testing is that when there's a very intense audio scene, there isn't that much spike in enjoyment. when the scenes are more subtle, this bigger sense of difference. So I think you can only process so much, and at the end of the day, you're putting people in an environment or telling a story, and that's still going to be the theme, not the technology. But I do think that, to your point, it's a perfect marriage. Yeah, more questions?
Okay, my name is Etienne Cortel. I work in Sonic Emotion on 3D audio as well, over loudspeakers and headphones. I had a question regarding the music industry, because we saw that the music industry didn't really take the 5.1 train.
Yep.
So when we talk about 3D audio, what could be the reasons for them to really make it this time and not miss that technology evolution?
My personal opinion is the artists. Get the artists excited, and you'll change the world, because it's like any other tool. It's only as good as the person using it. So I think by getting the artists engaged, they will want to present their material in this new way, and the fans will follow, because it sounds amazing. And who doesn't love great sound? Whatever your flavor of music is, if it sounds great, people love it. So I think it's just a matter of time.
I have a few other points maybe to add. What is the largest music streaming player? Is it YouTube? I think it's pretty big. So video with music is increasingly popular. If we say that mobile is becoming a device of choice for streaming music, then again that's where headphone and quality of headphone playback becomes very important. Moving even further, as we discussed a little bit before, if we enable the end user to be able to interact with their content, so that driven by the size of a screen or by other means, and basically when Sting is playing, I can be next to him, for example, and see it from his point of view. That's another feature that is not about surround sound. It's not about putting more loudspeakers in your living room. It's enabling you to interact with your audio, and that requires special information to be brought to you. So anyway, that would be another.
Okay. Maybe one comment as well. What do you think, all of you, about the tools currently available for creating 3D audio? Do you think they are sufficient? Do you think they are efficient? And can we do better?
I would like to take that.
I know my answer. But,
I would like to take that, yes. As someone who has been trying to, like I said, repurpose stereo and 5.1 material for 3D, it's a little bit frustrating the way the tools currently stand. And there are a few plugins, obviously, and they do a fine job, but they're not blowing me out of the water yet. And I want to have the same experience as you have with the binaural microphone, where you get height, depth, width, everything, every sense, and it's 75% there, maybe. So as an end user, I'll be looking very forward to these technologies improving.
And then from a programming perspective, it's a nightmare. There's no other way of putting it. If you go through the most well-documented libraries you can possibly have, you're going to get next to nothing. And so you have books written to compensate for that. But if you go even through Core Audio, which is Apple's solution, or if you go to openal.org right now, it says coming back soon, if I'm not mistaken. There's very little documentation, and what's really tough is that we're very sensible to audio. As Geir was saying, when the video isn't working right, our tolerance to that is pretty good. When the audio is off, it really destroys the experience. So what's happening for whatever processor that's working there is that it needs to deliver that sound perfectly every time. So it needs to perform every time. And therefore, that code needs to be very low level. It's almost machine language. And it's really tough because not only is it machine language, it's machine language almost with with almost no documentation. So yeah, there's a lot of room for improvement.
Okay, thank you. We're working on that as well.
Thank you.
Great. Next question.
Hi, my name is Wilson Brown. I work at a music company in New York, sort of in a similar sphere to you. And we've done a lot of binaural work over the years, and I wanted to ask all of you about what you see as the future of production binaurally. We have Fritz, the Neumann head, and we've also done some projects where we fold 5.1 sound down into a binaural experience using the Fraunhofer plugins. But the binaural head, though it sounds great, is very cumbersome, and there's not always time or budget for that. The 5.1 thing either is or will soon become, in my mind, like an antiquated format. And so I'm wondering what you guys see moving forward in terms of actually, creating this content.
That's a loaded question in a couple ways. I think it's really more to the gear people. I'm happy to have you guys take this, but from my perspective, I was literally just thinking about doing the similar thing, which is put the head in the room, play back my 5.1 mix, have it pick it up, re-stem it. It's cumbersome, and frequently nobody's got the time or the budget for that. So your point is absolutely well made.
So I think just to add on to that, I think what you describe is a very difficult workflow environment. I think the other thing that is probably maybe just as bothersome is unpredictable. You don't know that the actual what you're hearing is what people are going to get. So that's the problem we've tried to solve with our initiative around what we call Headphone X, which is an extension of our format that allows you to mix in your environment, send it along, and then it will automatically adjust to the playback environment when it gets to the end user. So that way, you don't really have to think about whether it's 5.1 or stereo. You're just mixing for headphones, for headphone playback. And now, your question though is really how easy is the tool yet? And so far, it's still kind of a workaround, to be perfectly honest. But I think it's coming. It's just a matter of time.
What's your company, man? Cool. Talk after.
Yeah. All right, I think we got one more question before they turn the lights out.
My name is Geir. I'm a recording engineer, so I'm also interested in not only the binaural way of how you record things, but are you adding extra mics in different places to add towards wherever you're going to be?
Great. So you want to take the mic part, and then I'll talk a little bit. I can answer.
So I don't know. I don't want to imply that we have a solution. We are far from that. But ideally, to create audio objects that would be compliant, to feed Dolby Atmos, DTS, NDA, or the other object systems, we'll be able to focus on the sounds of interest, all of them, and record them as individual and separate and isolated sound assets. Feed it to the system that the author or the mixer would use the tool to create their intention in terms of positioning, and as time goes by, and all this information, the isolated assets and the mix metadata would arrive at the end user, and then would be rendered, at home, depending on the system used at home. So, yeah.
Sorry, I'm involved in a lot of live streaming as well. Is this something that 3D audio will be able to even offer a live streaming option?
Yeah, I actually think that's the exciting part, is that you don't need really much bandwidth addition. So the the things we did, which took low quality stereo and replaced it with a stream of 3D sound, was basically a 10-15% increase in bandwidth overall. So that's very little when you think about all the overall usage of bandwidth and the changes in video quality rates and bandwidth. Yeah. The other thing I'd say is that if you think about existing masters, so to your question, do you have to record again? Yes and no. We've had incredible results going back to old Motown and the recordings that were done kind of before you started mastering for FM, where there's very clean stems and very high quality engineering work and taking those old tracks and remixing them for this it sounds incredible. And it gives the mastering engineer a lot of flexibility because each stem is very cleanly recorded. So in that sense, you don't really have to record anything. You can take the old masters and re-release them in this way. All right? So I think we're over time, and for those of you waiting for beer, sorry to bring it to you, you're in the wrong seats. There will be no service here. But if there's any more questions, then we'll take them. Other than that, I wish you a great evening. Thank you to Scott, Robert, and Veronique.
Thank you. Thanks for sticking around.